Yes, I am reading a book called Lincoln and Davis. These are notes. The table of contents, let me see. The copyright date is 2005 by Beckham Publication Group Incorporated. Printed in the United States. Lincoln and Davis, Table of Contents, Dividing a Nation, Chapter 1. There were some very important notes that I have discovered in here. Dividing a nation. Many comparative studies have been done on Civil War leaders, particularly men from the military establishment. However, not many have been done on politicians. A comparative study of two political giants shed a unique light on the Civil War era. Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis played a pivotal role in influencing the political views of both the North and the South. One stood for state rights and slavery. The other stood for abolishment of slavery, to maintain a united country and the equal rights of all citizens as outlined in the Constitution of the United States. The Civil War saw a division of a nation created by regional and political differences, never before experienced at the time by a developing nation, and never again to occur, even though frequent movement of internal strife. The aftermath of the Civil War depicted with resounding clarity that the strength of the human spirit and the national character of a nation could prevail over regional differences and individual prejudices. This writer takes the reader through the early years of two Civil War political leaders, their similarities and differences, and their impact as government presidents of a divided nation. Moreover, attention is given to the inability of the South to sustain an effective fighting force and a solid infrastructure, causing a collapse of the Confederacy. Finally, we see a post-war nation mending itself and experiencing social and economic changes after years of hardship, suffering, and destruction. Dividing a Nation, Chapter 1. No period in our nation's history is so ingrained in the minds of its citizens than the Civil War, or the war between the states, as it is sometimes called. Of all the conflicts in which these United States have been engaged, the Civil War has remained in the forefront of the minds of its citizens for over 143 years. The Civil War was unique because it was clearly a war of states. The engagements were fought not only by state militia and regular army for both sides, but also by men who fought their own relatives, friends, and acquaintances. This nation suffered more casualties than those in any other war combined until Vietnam. But significantly unlike World War I and II, this war was fought exclusively on America's soil and exclusively between its own people. We were a developing nation during the early 1800s with a total population around 31.5 million people. But our emergence as a nation that would be changed forever from within shows a strong national charter, character, and its unwillingness to bend for the good of the whole. For 5 years, we had two nations within one, each with its own central government headed by its own president. You ain't see my show yesterday.
Hold on, I can't
Look, talking about the whitest, how we had nearly 12 million slaves in the United States, and talking about President Lincoln. He was a Republican, but Jeff Davis was a Democrat. But all of the Baptist churches back in the day were started by the Ku Klux Klan, and all our people go to what Baptist churches right to this day.
But see, they don't really practice under that Baptist stuff. Because St. Paul's is a Baptist church, but they still Christians in there. He couldn't change the nationality of the church.
But because them crackers started it for themselves and flew the Confederate flag and had so many slaves, you don't want to deal with that.
Exactly.
You don't want. I ain't no way in the world you can change that up.
You can't change it.
And found out the NAACP, back in the day, they used poor people, black people money to get them Ku Klux Klan out of jail and everything. What you got on smell good like that?
I use one number oil.
Well, it smells some kind of good.
Look, I got an incident this morning. Brother up in here this morning.
Who?
A brother up in here pulling a racist car. Knocked his ass up out of here.
What did it look like? It wasn't nobody out with.
I tell this nigga to turn his phone on, put his phone on vibrate. He done went completely ballistic. Stop being a nigga, working for all these damn crackers up in here. I said, that's you being right now, and you better get up out of here. I was too through. He up in here this morning just making a scene calling his racist car. So no, he didn't just stand here and call me no
But
nigga.
he wouldn't come back in here.
Oh no, he allowed up in here. Someone's out to catch up with him. You gonna step foot up in this door one more time?
And that's
I'm gonna show you just how much nigga I can be.
That's
I know
right.
you gonna let me do my job and get up out of here with the name calling too.
This stuff is so hurtful. In here talking about the slaves were treated like cattle. They were property. They were on the list with the cattle. This is called Lincoln and Davis.
Okay.
Like this. That thing is so hurtful, girl. It is so hurtful how they were talking about the slaves and what they couldn't do and what they could do. That thing hurt me to my heart. Talking about they didn't have no rights and they used to beat them so bad that they would not want to run away. You missed my show. They're going to run it back. I told on them whitest last night, so help me God. I fixed them, and every time I go up there, I'm like they flying. You know they call it the master plan? It's a slave master's plan for us. Yeah, I put it all on the internet, boo. I ain't think about none of them. Kiss my ass. I found out Ellen Robinson had paid them niggas to destroy my house, my car. Tell me they were going to see me in the street. They going to have my house condemned and everything. I knew this morning when I was coming downtown, the white news reporter was riding around there. I know he heard what I said. He went around there to see the house behind me. The bitch's Section 8. The house been filthy for the last 8 years. Ellen Robinson niece, they don't come and inspect nothing. She have lived like a fucking pig. Had 4 felons living in that big time. Felons are not supposed to be in Section 8 houses. And she is renting rooms in the Section 8 house. And I told all of that shit last night. I said, that's why some of y'all waiting on Section 8 house. You can't get anything. Because they got all these criminals in it. They got drugs, child abuse, child molesters, and everything in these Section 8 houses. And McCool at HUD and his girl Davis, they all knew about it. Social services all know about it, but they're not doing anything about it at all. And I'm burning their asses. Fuck. You know I am. They can't mess with me. You know I ain't worried about it. God is good. Be blessed, my sister. Love you, girl. Gotta do what I got to do. Now, I'm getting back to this. The westward movement impacted tremendously the opening of new territories to those who sought a new life in land ownership. The discovery of gold in 1845 in California saw an explosion of people, to include individuals from around the world coming to seek their fortune. This was especially since California petitioned the Congress and received approval to enter the Union as a free state. The passage of the controversial Fugitive Slave Act, which requires citizens to assist in the recovery of fugitive slaves. Under this act, slaves who escaped from a terrible imprisonment of bondage, if caught, were returned to the slave owner and were also denied the rights to a jury trial. The special commissioner who worked in favor of the slaveholders handled their cases. Moreover, according to the acts, the federal government allocated more federal officials to enforce the law. No longer were fugitive slaves safe, even though they placed their lives in grave danger attempting to be free. Fugitive free slaves captured had no legal rights to plead their cases. Simply put, they were defenseless. The Compromise of 1850 motivated abolitionists to take the drastic measures to abolish slavery. The Underground Railroad was an active system of way stations whereby fugitive slaves had transported to northern states and Canada. Although no exact figure can be quoted, it is estimated that between 1850 and 1860, approximately 20,000 blacks escaped to Canada. Although these escapes were mostly nonviolent and caused very little physical harm, their escape to freedom did greatly reduce the economic free labor base of slaveholders who depended upon slaves to harvest their crops. Even though the Underground Railroad was nonviolent, other abolitionist movements were not as civil. The John Brown raid at Harper's Ferry in Virginia, Nat Turner's raid of terror around southeastern Virginia clearly showed how injustice and perception motivated the oppressed to inflict harm, even upon those who had little or no influence upon the an untenable situation in which those in bondage found themselves. My devotion to the Union of our fathers have also been so often and so publicly declared. I had on the floor the Senate so defiantly challenged in the questions of my fidelity to it, my service, civil and military. How had now extended through a long period and were so generally known that I felt quite assured that no whispering of envy or ill will could lead the people of Mississippi to believe that I had dishonored their trust by the power they had conferred on me to destroy the government to which I was accredited. Then, as afterward, I regarded the separation of the state as a great, though not the greatest evil. Mr. Davis was a Democrat and Lincoln was a Republican. Mr. Davis' loyalty toward the Union and his commitment to the political views of the Southern Republican politicians, views of the Southern politicians led one to believe that he was plagued by what is morally right in his own mind as compared to what was politically advantageous in the South. Events clearly show how that loyalty to a cause overweighed moral views and the dictate of conscience. Although Jefferson Davis had no opposition to slavery, knowing that slavery was a critical stumbling block for those who opposed it, he continued to lobby for unity among all states and openly expressed opposition to secession. Henry Clay, a United States Senator from Kentucky, slumped up the predicament that Davis found himself And when he quoted as saying, Mr. Davis did not take any active part in planning or hastening secession, I think he only regretfully consented to it as a political necessity for the preservation of popular and state rights, which were seriously threatened by the triumph of a sectional party who pledged to make war upon them. I know that some leading men and even Mississippians thought him too moderate and backwards and found fault with him for not taking a leading part in the secession. Note Clay, May 1860. From all accounts, Mr. Davis was a brave human being, a shrewd politician who made every attempt to adhere to the sectional views of his constituents while attempting to preserve one united country. However, in the end, sectional forces were too overpowering, and Davis succumbed to their wishes, accordingly, acknowledging the course taken by the secessionists in his state of Mississippi, which he fully justified. He made an exclusively appropriate and pathetic address to the Senate, where he is quoted as saying, I do think she has justifiable cause, and I approve of her act. I am sure to feel no hostility toward you. Senators of the North, I am sure there is not one of you, whatever sharp discussion there may have been between us, to whom I cannot say in the presence of God, I wish you well. Mr. President and Senators, having made the announcement, it only remains for me to bid you a final adieu. Davis, January 1861. As we attempt to bring into forces the political psychology of Davis and how we went to great lengths to satisfy both the philosophical point of view of his Southern constituents as well as their Northern rival, one must conclude that Jefferson Davis was a troubled man. He was a man driven by a dedication to a greater constituency, the United States of America, quote and unquote, and a commitment to a smaller constituency, the secessionist states within the United States. We can only surmise that he was not a man to desert a cause that he swore to uphold as a candidate at West Point, as a representative and senator from the state of Mississippi, and as the Secretary of War in the cabinet of President Franklin Pierce. As much he experienced a painful apprehension about what be his final role in his beloved country, though he must have known the country was about to be torn apart by the dubious issue of whether or not one man had the right to enslave another. Did he understand the weight of and fully believe in Lincoln's proclamation that a house divided cannot stand? Jefferson Davis, unlike many politicians of his day, was recognized by his friends and foes alike as a man of great humility and intellect, devout Christian faith, and a man devoted to reaching an amicable solution to the conflict of his day. Although Davis at the end was persuaded against his conscience to join the seceding states, he was highly respected by members of the opposing party, who accepted him not only as a states writer, but as an American whose secessional persuasion overshadowed his true worth as a great spokesman of a duly authorized government. Jefferson Davis' dedication to his native South can be best summed up in a statement attributed to him at a time when loyalty to his region took precedence over loyalty to his native country. He is quoted as saying in 1861, "The North shall smell Southern power and feel Southern steel." The years that followed these comments failed to achieve the results for Mr. Davis. In 1858, Abraham Lincoln ran as a Republican for a Senate seat in the state of Illinois against Stephen A. Douglas, a Democrat. In his senatorial nomination, Lincoln suggested Douglas and two Democratic presidents, Franklin Pierce and James Buchanan, had conspired to nationalize slavery. Also during this speech, Lincoln expressed the view that the nation would become either all slave or all free. A house divided against itself cannot stand. This speech by Lincoln did not win him the Senate seat again, but Stephen Davis, the Democratic senator from Illinois, but it established Lincoln as an impressive representative of the Republican Party, who went on to win the presidential election against his presidential hopefuls to include Stephen Douglas. The years that followed, these comments failed to achieve the results for which Mr. Davis and his fellow Southerners had hoped. Although Jefferson Davis was elected President of the Confederate States of America, his tenure as president was a rocky one, suffering from a lack of sustaining manpower for his military, coupled with a lack of manufacturing capability. Jefferson Davis' government will fall into disarray. Additionally, one of the hardest blows inflicted upon his government was not major defeat on the battlefield. His rival, President Abraham Lincoln, signing in the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the manpower base of the Confederacy, struck at the very core of Jefferson Davis' political and economic survival. The years of 1861 through 65 saw a turbulent time for Jefferson Davis. Can we see a similar situation occurring with Abraham Lincoln? To understand better the greatness of this political leader, one must understand the political philosophy of Abraham Lincoln and how and why the 16th president of the United States of America became one of the greatest presidents that America has ever known. The political philosophy of Abraham Lincoln. Truth is the best vindication against slander. Abraham Lincoln was born in Hodgenville, Kentucky, a border state less than 100 miles from the birthplace of Jefferson Davis. Lincoln was a Republican by party affiliation and is espoused definite political views, all of which led to his assassination on Good Friday, 1865. Political and moral philosophy can be best summed up in a statement taken from his second inaugural address and inscribed on the wall of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with fairness and the right as God gives us to see the right, Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds. A close analysis of these words clearly bring out the true spirit of a man who sought not to keep a nation divided, but to unite one that was torn apart by political and moral differences. The saying, "to the victor goes the spoils," was not part of Mr. Lincoln's intent, as it was referred to his fellow Southern countrymen. Even through the political climate at the time was one of disunity. As we make a political comparison between Davis and Lincoln, an obviously question should surface: why did Lincoln, born in Kentucky, a border state, become a champion of a united cause, while Davis was born in Kentucky, a border state, succumbed to the political pressure of his Southern constituents at an early age of 7? In 1865, Lincoln's family moved to southern Indiana, a state free of slavery. Then at the age of 21, Lincoln moved with his family to Illinois, another state free of slavery. Exposure to people in these two states where he spent his adolescent and early manhood greatly influenced his political opinion and moral views. Early on, Lincoln's political views were influenced by his parents, Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln, who left their Baptist church because of its support for slavery and helped begin their own church. Lincoln's deep religious beliefs also impacted how he would solve issues pertaining to the rights of the individuals and the belief that each person should be guided by his own conscience, an attribute that goes beyond politics and individual aspirations. Lincoln's deep concern about the destiny of mankind can best be described by Dr. Joshua G. Harlan, editor of Scribner's Monthly and Illinois monthly publication. Dr. Harlan, in the 1865 editorial, commented on Lincoln's strong religious views. When he wrote, he believes in the power and ultimate triumph of the right through his belief in God. His conscience took a broader grasp than the simple apprehension of right and wrong. Although Lincoln was not an abolitionist, he was opposed to the expansion of slavery for two reasons: inflicting bondage upon another human being was morally wrong and violated the basic principle of equality which the Constitution of the United States was based upon. And number two, that the unity of one nation, one government, and one people should remain intact. It is clear that the national climate in 1857, when Lincoln gave his House Divided speech and its bearing on the future of the United States, was of great concern to Lincoln. As a member of the United States House of Representatives from the state of Illinois, could he hold the North and South together as war clouds loomed in succession was a strong possibility. The road to the presidency that sent to the top of any organization requires more than merely showing interest. Promotions require commitment to the organization and the willingness for personal sacrifice. This chapter will focus upon those attributes of Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis and what motivated them to seek the highest political office in the land. Seeking the presidency by these two men came at a time when war clouds loomed over a deeply divided country caught between moral values, unity of country, individual political views, and political party platforms. taking a little break here. How each man faced these challenges, overcame obstacles, adversities, and personal convictions unfold in the succeeding decisions. Some historians and laymen alike would argue that Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis served two legitimate governments. However, the Constitution of the United States of America formed one government. Any foreign body beyond these established laws constituted secession, thereby making itself an unauthorized governing body. As we explore the political philosophies of these two men, it becomes quite apparent that both understood the dynamics of politics and both truly believed in the Constitution of the United States. Both Lincoln and Davis possessed high morals and religious belief and aspired to serve the people. Yet, how could these strong-willed individuals follow such different political climes to the presidency? There were several elements that greatly influenced the political views of these two men, which clearly defined their political orientation. Abraham Lincoln at an early age moved from the state of Kentucky to the state of Illinois. This move exposed him to an entirely different moral value system than the moral beliefs so commonly practiced in his native state of Kentucky. The central issue here rests with the interpretation of moral values as they pertain to the treatment of human beings, especially the rights and privileges of blacks as outlined in the Constitution of the United States of America. The state of Illinois, now the land of Lincoln, practiced the words of the Constitution, particularly the human rights issues. Most politicians in other northern states followed the same political views as championed by the state of Illinois. Exposure to those views talked about and lived by so many people greatly influenced Abraham Lincoln to champion the cause of a united country free of slavery. Wow. Similarly, Jefferson Davis also respected the Constitution, having been sworn in as a graduate of the United States Academy of West Point. However, Jefferson Davis' rise to political prominence came about under entirely different circumstances than Lincoln's. Davis moved from the state of Kentucky to the state of Mississippi, a state ingrained with the belief in state rights, that no government should intervene into the running of their affairs, and that blacks were property to be bought and sold at the pleasure of their owners. With exposure to this kind of intense culture, coupled with his prior exposure to the views of the Kentucky politicians and their followers, Davis shaped his political future. The second major political influence upon Jefferson Davis was the political views of powerful regional politicians embracing states' rights, ownerships of another human being, and the opposition of any involvement by the federal government in state affairs. It is also interesting to note that we now see the emergence of two distinct political parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Lincoln, having switched from the Whigs to the Republican Party, began to develop a political platform that would appeal to his constituents. Oh Lord. constituency. Okay. A political party formed to oppose the Democratic Party, succeeded by the Republican Party, in favoring high tariffs and loose interpretation of the Constitution. And the source is the Webster's New Collegiate Dictionary. This book, by the way, is written by William O. Lawton. Begins to develop a political platform that would appeal to his constituency. Equally as interesting are the party platforms. For example, Jefferson Davis was a Democrat while Lincoln was a Republican. However, Jefferson Davis' party weighed heavily upon the doctrine of state rights, placing ultimate sovereignty with individual states. That also meant that states had within their jurisdiction the right to own, abuse, and even put to death those held in bondage without being charged with a crime. Oh my God, that's what Woody and them doing down at the jail. This powerful tool of suppression served as a deterrent to those who dared to commit any wrongdoing. Although this may have been applicable to all, blacks bore the brunt of this inequality. Put another way, they were the beasts of burden, to be treated like animals. In fact, they were considered property of their owners, placing horses, cows, pigs, etc. in the same category as people. Realistically, pigs and cows were hanged to be slaughtered for the supper table, while blacks were hanged to suppress their will to live as freely as the Constitution of the United States of America intended. The party of Lincoln, the Republican Party, was a party founded for the preservation of the Union and freedom of the individuals to live as the Bill of Rights outlined. Even though the party recognized the sovereignty of the state as long as it complied with those inalienable rights as guaranteed by the Declaration of Independence, this party as a whole could not condone state rights so long as they protected the bondage of another human being. If we could fast forward the platform of our political parties about 144 years, we can clearly see some similarities of the two major parties today. However, political views have reversed themselves. First, the current Democratic Party did not subscribe to state rights as promoted in the late 1850s and 1860s, a major platform of the political party at that time. Secondly, the current Democratic Party is labeled as free spending, liberal, and a great proponent of human rights, just the opposite of his platform when Lincoln and Davis were preparing to accept the challenge of becoming chief executive. Today's Republican Party leans heavily toward conservation and more power to the states to govern themselves and reduction in federal intervention. Oh my God. Oh my Lord Jesus. Again, today Republicans' party leans heavily toward conservationism, more power to the states to govern themselves, and reduction in federal intervention. Moreover, in today's political arena, the other minor parties have engaged that do not espouse the political views of either major party. Specifically, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party have emerged, which other groups were waiting to demonstrate their political views. These parties often act as spoilers to the two-party system. History has shown that these minor parties have existed well before the Civil War and become more aggressive during the Civil War, all reacting to a specific need or want of a particular religion, fraternal, or labor group. For example, the anti-Masonic Party came into being because they were concerned that the free and accepted Masons were controlling the voters through a secret organization. The Working Men Party concentrated upon land reform and labor movement, and the Know Nothing Party was said to have grown out of a secret fraternal organization of the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner, whose members were instructed, when asked about their organization, to respond saying, "I know nothing. I know nothing." Oh my God. Minor political party views, to some degree, shape political decisions of both Abraham Lincoln and Jefferson Davis. Although these minority parties did not align themselves with the Republican or the Democrats, each did champion some platform issues pushed by each major party, thereby joining forces with those political voters of either party who believed in their political agenda. This approach siphoned votes from either side. Who benefited or who lost depend upon which party potential voters believe is acting in their best interest. As I discuss either in this chapter, many political parties have not been able to make a significant difference in the outcome of the major parties' election of a president, even though we have been recognized by the United States then and now as a voice of certain element of our society. No member of any minor political party has been elected president, as the two political giants established themselves with their party affiliation. It became apparent that regionalism played a major role, especially for Davis, on the issue of slavery. As a native son of Mississippi, Davis was gradually being torn between his loyalty to the government of the United States and his commitment to his fellow Mississippians and other Southerners on state rights as Secretary of War. Under President Franklin Pierce, Davis had positioned himself to assume even greater responsibility than he had acquired as a senator from Mississippi. The mood of the South was growing tense, and the cloud of secession appeared to be near. As we look at Southern politics and the men that shaped the South's future, Jefferson Davis seemed to be the most likely candidate to assume the enormous task of leading the Confederacy based upon his military and political accomplishments. He was a college-educated man. He was a graduate of the United States Military Academy. He was a war hero of the Black Hawk War and the Mexican-American War. He served in the United States House of Representatives for the state of Mississippi. He served as a United States Senator from the state of Mississippi. He was a staunch believer in states' rights. It's my belief that aside all other duties, responsibilities, and political philosophies of Davis, his commitment to state rights was the strongest and most influential motivation that railed his supporters to elect him president of the Confederacy. Oh my God. The other political giant, Abraham Lincoln, was establishing himself not only as a successful lawyer, but also as a crafty politician. His ability as a debater, a unifier, and of the people of his simply holistic approach to maintaining one United Nations formed the bias for his climb to the presidency. And I bet his climb did not occur through the elite social and political channels that Jefferson Davis came to enjoy, but were shrewd politicians. Unlike Jefferson Davis, Abraham Lincoln lacked a formal education. He was self-taught, although he did not receive some formal education by today's standard. He attended elementary school. His motivations to lead led him to read religiously, thereby broadening his vocabulary. This will to learn also led him to study law in his spare time, to the extent that he qualified himself as a lawyer and practiced law for many years. Lincoln's party opposed expansion of slavery and felt that slavery was immoral and unconstitutional. As an effective orator, Lincoln delivered compelling speeches, mainly on the issue of slavery. One of his most convincing speeches was during his acceptance of the Republican nomination for a Senate seat, when he stressed that the United States would either become all free, would become either all slave or all free. A house divided against itself cannot stand. In my view, these powerful words fall into the same category as "Remember the Alamo, give me liberty or give me death, Patrick Henry," quote and unquote. Damn the torpedo, full speed ahead. That was Rear Admiral David Farragut, quote and unquote, and I shall return. Douglas MacArthur. Although Lincoln was not successful in his bid for the senatorial seat, he convinced Republicans and Democrats alike that he was capable of meeting any challenge, obstacle, or adversity that would deter his fight to uphold the Union together. The hanging clouds of a divided nation loomed heavily on the minds of those politicians who were willing to commit themselves and their constituency to a cause whose outcome would be determined through armed conflict. Abraham Lincoln was charged and was determined to maintain a union, while Jefferson Davis was charged to unite 11 states of the Confederacy with its own government. Chapter 4. The Presidents. This chapter focuses upon how the two men, one stressing unity and one stressing secession, led their government through turbulent times. One was victorious in the end, and the other was defeated and stripped of his citizenship. Let's talk about Jefferson Davis as a man who had taken an oath as a military officer to defend the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and how he so greatly influenced by his consistencies to break this oath after he departed from military service. A deserter. And it is this writer's belief that Davis was a troubled man torn between loyalty to the nation that he pledged to uphold and the pressure imposed by his followers to succeed. In 1861, Jefferson Davis became the people's choice to lead the Confederacy in armed conflict against the United States. The will to fight for what he believed in was compelling force that drove the southern states to secede and form their own government, establish a constitution, and to select cabinet positions and individuals to fill those positions. Simply put, we now see two governing governments existing. I would not label them as coexisting because they did not attempt to work out their regional differences at the negotiating table, but rather on battlefields stained with blood of brothers and others. Two major issues surrounded Jefferson Davis' presidency: his strong belief in state rights, and embedded in these rights, the issue of slavery. State rights was a powerful issue for the Confederacy because it gave the states total control to operate as they wished without influence from the outside, particularly the federal government of the United States. Oh my God. The South being almost authoritarian society in a time when any nation needed resources to equip an army for combat and shortchange. And President Davis had to deal with this dilemma. He had one major asset that allowed his government to operate: the free manpower of thousands of slaves who produced goods and provided services advantageous to the Confederate cause. It was the intent of President Davis to produce sufficient commodities, cotton, wheat, corn, and tobacco, not only to sustain the Confederacy, but also to export significant amounts to secure hard currency, to maintain a viable government, and support a fighting army. In turn, he also hoped that being able to export goods while winning on the battlefield would work in his favor to secure foreign assistance. It is my belief that this approach was strategically and militarily sound. Provided foreign power would come to the aid of the Confederacy, there were at least three good reasons why Jefferson Davis failed at this effort. His government was unable to provide commodities in a sufficient quantity to foreign countries to have any positive impact upon their own economy. Number two, his armies were not